Good evening, everyone. I'd like to reconvene the open session of the Coventry School Committee. I have 6:15. If we could all stand for the Pledge of Allegiance, please. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic which stands one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. And if we could remain standing for a moment of silence as we consider the work before us this evening. And I would like to make a special mention about the soldiers that were killed today in Afghanistan. Keep them in our thoughts and prayers. Thank you very much. And just to inform the public, the school committee met in executive session for about 15 minutes before this meeting, at which point we had two votes, both of them unanimous. One was for the approval of our executive session minutes on 8/12/21, and one was to approve the homeschooling requests. That being said, is there a motion to seal the minutes of the executive session?
Madam Chair, I make a motion to seal the minutes of the executive session.
I second the motion.
Thank you. Could we have a roll call vote, please?
Catherine Patino,
Yes.
David Florio,
Yes.
Luke Murray,
Yes.
Donna Colunian,
Yes.
James Pearson.
Yes.
Thank you. Motion carries 5-0. Okay, moving on to the approval of our minutes from 8/12/21. Is there a motion?
Madam Chair, I make a motion to approve the minutes of 8/12/2021.
I second the motion.
Thank you. Can we have a roll call vote, please?
Catherine Patino,
Yes.
David Florio,
Yes.
Luke Murray,
Yes.
Donna Colunian.
Yes.
James Pearson.
Yes.
Thank you. Motion carries 5-0. Moving on to the public agenda. For those in the public who are here, the school committee allows comments to be made on every agenda item. If there's a vote that's going to be taken, then we ask, I call for the vote, we ask for citizen participation. That being said, I guess we can, so we're moving on to number 6, which was the audit review, which needs to be tabled. So is there a motion to table that?
Madam Chair, I make a motion to table the audit review by Representatives Clifton, Lawson, and Allen LLP.
I second the motion.
Okay, do we have a roll call, please?
Catherine Patino,
Yes.
David Florio,
Yes.
Luke Murray,
Yes.
Donna Colunian,
Yes.
James Pearson.
Yes.
Thank you. Motion carries 5-0. Moving on to the school building committee update. I believe that must be you, Mr. Murray.
Yeah, so we've been doing a lot of work, as many of you know. We met last night as a committee. We're running through the presentation for the 31st. As you know, we have a meeting coming up that's extremely important. I received good news today that Mario Carino and Dr. Joe Da Silva will be at our meeting, which is not common. They don't typically go to communities. We requested their presence. They're a great resource, and it kind of is emblematic of the support we've been receiving throughout this project. So in addition to Seth Magaziner, the state treasurer, we will also have the SBA there. That's very exciting, and I hope other people will attend, whoever's listening tonight. I've been running through the architect, the presentations. We had a great meeting last night where we brainstormed about how we can keep it interactive. It will be live streamed. We're going to be visiting the senior center tomorrow to look at logistics. What else do I have? We had a orientation meeting today. So the staff orientation was today. Phil Conte, the project architect, and myself had the opportunity to present a very brief presentation at that orientation. I think it was productive. It was brief, but I think it got across the main points. It was really meant to be a teaser and to get across what the essence of the project is without giving too much information. So my hope is that the community will start getting engaged. And I'd urge my fellow school committee members to be engaged as well and start paying attention, you will be at that meeting. I'm assuming, I have positive confirmations on all of you to be at that meeting. And I encourage the public to be at the meeting. We're going to really need public support on this. But the biggest thing is I just want the community to keep an open mind, not let the past dictate the future of the town. Whatever gets dragged along, it shouldn't be. And so really look at this with a fresh look. Look at it as something that we really need, not want. Nobody wants to raise taxes, but when you have almost 60% of the state, states picking up 60% of the cost, you have projects that eventually have to be done. We know it's a good time to get it done. So there's a lot of work going on in the background. I won't go into too much more detail. Be glad to answer any questions the committee has. But the biggest thing we're driving for right now is the 31st. After that meeting, I expect that we'll be working in unison with the town on financial strategies to see if we can make this happen, because that's one of the biggest outstanding items, I think. The project is pretty much baked up. We really need to figure out at this point, can we make it affordable and palatable to the town to move forward with the ballot? So that's all I have.
Great, thank you, Mr. Murray. Mr. Pearson, do you have any questions?
Thank you for the update. As always, looking forward to next week and getting more information, and hopefully, again, the more we communicate to the community, I think the better it will be. I know you also recently sent out a survey. I know probably too much to talk about the details of the responses, but what kind of, was it successful? Did you get a good response, and will that information be
Yeah,
usable?
We did, and it was a basic survey, just outlining the core aspects of what we plan to present. I think it, without a doubt, and Don can speak to this, is I think the majority is focused on finances, right? I think many people up to this point understand the projects. If they don't, I think they will, and understand the need. What it's really about is, in this community, especially always with the budget cycles we've gone through, is affordability. And so that's a dialogue I look forward to. I think that's something we do have to address forthrightly. Nothing is free. The question is, what are we getting the best value for our money and as a community from a variety of angles? So it was helpful, Mr. Pearson. I think knowing that we're going to have to address that. We talked, Harold and I followed up after the meeting last night, and we talked about that. John Priest, who's a committee member, who's just, I don't say just, that's a wrong term, but a community member who's not affiliated with any elected official. One of our building committee members will be doing the majority of speaking to the finances. And I think that bodes well because he can speak in terms that I think most residents can relate to, not super high level. Harold will obviously be there to get to the high level stuff if we need to, but the goal is to kick off that discussion, not necessarily end it that night. Good. You're welcome.
Thank you. Mrs. Colonian, anything?
I don't have any questions, just to let you know, what you do, I do work till 7, so I will be late, but I'll be there.
We'll count on it. I'll save you a cup of coffee.
Thank you. I'll need it.
And Mr. Florio?
Great work. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Dave.
I don't have anything except to say I'm looking forward to Tuesday and the presentation. And I think there's excitement that's going to be building. And I don't know about you, but I'm really excited about it. So,
Yeah, and there'll be a full-scale model, physical model, that will be out front that people can come see if they want to attend the meeting of the middle school campus, how it would look if we were to move forward with the project. So I think that's kind of neat. It's exciting to see it in 3D and be able to kind of take it all in. So, and we already have, as we saw in orientation today, the architects worked on 3D renderings, fly-throughs. I mean, all good stuff. So. Thank you.
all right. Thank you, Mr. Murray, as always, for all the work on this project. I guess we can move on to agenda item number 8, the reentry plan, 2021-22 presentation and discussion and vote. So Mr. Levis, it's Mr. Howitt, you're on.
So Mr. Levis asked me to present this plan, and I wanted to give some background information before I got too far into it. 2 weeks ago, district administrators met to discuss health and safety protocols for the buildings and for the district. And we wanted to make sure we were on the same page and consistent so that The messaging from one building to the other wasn't inconsistent. After that, the superintendent met with the nurses, Brad Wilson and myself, 2 or 3 different times. We also attended the state pod meetings, which is when the Department of Health presents the playbook and all the updated recommendations for the school. So what we did is we went through the reentry plan and we pulled out the section about health and safety, and we built a presentation around that. And so this presentation is around the health and safety protocols that we're going to put in place for 21, 22. So the very first one is masking. On August 19th, 2021, the governor signed the executive order. It's linked as a reference at the end of this presentation if anybody wants to look at it. It just states that employees, staff, students, visitors are required to wear a mask when entering the school building, regardless of their vaccination status, and masks do not need to be worn outside. Attestation. This is a little bit different than we've done in the past. People are responsible to, are required to attest that they have done a personal screening of their health condition and status. And so for most of last year, that was done on a daily basis. It looked different in a few different places. Some people did it electronically and submitted forms electronically. Some people did it on paper. Last year, at the end of the year, Department of Health said that we could do a one-time attestation, which essentially allowed folks to answer the question once and to attest that they would continue to answer those questions to themselves at home. And if they felt that they had any of the symptoms, that they would agree to keep their children home and then to reach out to the school nurse to get further guidance. So we created a one-time attestation form that was shared with staff yesterday. As of an hour ago, about 510 of our staff had already taken the attestation form, so we only have a few hundred left and we'd be all set there. And parents are going to get the email tomorrow morning with the attestation form for them to complete. And then school buildings will be responsible for tracking who's completed the forms and who they need to then reach out to get attestation completed. Visitors. So we are not, we are allowed to allow visitors into the buildings. We're going to do it on a limited basis because we do want to make sure that we reduce contact time with people that are not part of the stable pods that are created in the building. All visitors, regardless of their vaccination status, will wear a mask, which is part of the executive order. All visitors who will enter the building are required to fill out an attestation form. And then administrators will keep a log of all visitors so that we can keep track of who was in the building, the time that they spent in the building, and who they were in touch with. On the slide, it talks about us keeping that information for 30 days. That was from the Department of Health, but the superintendent and I spoke earlier, and we're going to keep that information per the requirements of the Secretary of State for 1 year. So we'll update that. District and school-based events. When possible, we'll do things virtually, but we will still have in-person events at the school. And we will have professional development in person and sometimes virtually, depending on what's being presented and what's being shared. For stable groups, meaning especially at the elementary level where the kids are in the same class with the same kids every single day, physical distancing is not required within that stable group. At least 3 feet of physical distance space should be maintained between stable groups for activities. They're actually recommending 6. If schools choose to distance stable groups less than 6 feet, then there will be an increased number of close contacts between those groups. So I'll give you an example. In the cafeteria at the elementary schools, if the students sit by classroom, they're sitting amongst a stable group. If the next table over is a different stable group, they can be 3 feet apart, but the state is actually recommending 6 feet because if they're within the 6, there is a chance that when they do contact tracing, if a case were to happen, that there would be students from different stable groups cross-contaminating with each other, and they're trying to avoid that. For non-stable elementary groups, meaning if kids come out of class to attend small group support or some other small group session, they're not with their stable group anymore. And this is still basically at the elementary level. They will sit at least 3 feet apart as much as possible, and they will wear their masks. For non-stable middle school and high school groups where students are eligible for full vaccination, there is no requirement for physical distancing. In general, space between individuals or groups should be about 6 feet, and we must maintain seating charts for classrooms, cafeterias, buses, and any kind of events where we may have to do contact tracing. We're gonna put in place a district-wide coordinator. That's not been determined yet who that person is going to be, but it's going to be similar to the role that Peg Carroll had last year with a few other responsibilities in terms of being the point person in the district for parents, for staff, and then also to be in contact with Department of Health, depending on any situations that were to occur, and that each building is going to have their own coordinator, which is essentially going to be the school nurse. Symptomatic people, and this should not be a surprising list to anybody because this list has been shared for about 18 months. The difference is last year, they were looking for people to have 2 symptoms, and they kind of had this system where they had different categories. And if you had a symptom from one category and a symptom for another, you could come to school. But if you had 2 symptoms from one category, you couldn't come to school. Right now, it's just 1 symptom. So any person with one of the symptoms below should be considered a probable case, regardless of their vaccination status. I'm not going to read all those because everybody should know them. I'll give you a second to look at them. Employees who have a new symptom above, regardless of their status, should put themselves out of school on frontline as soon as they feel ill. For the people in the audience who are not employees, frontline is a system we use for attendance. It's also how we get subs for teachers who are absent. And what we found last year is sometimes when people had symptoms and they had questions about whether or not they should come to school or not, they were calling the nurse or emailing the principal to try to get their questions answered, but not putting themselves out in frontline. And by the time the decision was made for them to stay home, it was too late for us to get a sub. So we're saying to people now, put yourself out, let's secure a sub, and then we'll kind of go through the process of identifying your status. Students who have, and I just don't want to lose track of this, at the high school, we start early. So if we don't get that information at the front line early, we're not going to get a sub. And in that case, we could have as many as, I mean, I want to say one of the days last year, we had 10 classes uncovered, and we had to pull from other places to cover those classes, other schools. Students who have one or more of the symptoms above should stay home, contact the school nurse, and then any siblings who are not vaccinated should also remain at home. So testing, this one is still being worked out. Letter A basically just says, if you have one of those symptoms and you are instructed to get tested, here are 2 ways to get tested. You can go to the portal, ri.gov, or you can call the line for Rhode Island Department of Health and schedule a test. But we're also going to have our own testing for asymptomatic and symptomatic folks. We just haven't worked out all the details there. There's also more information to come about in terms of the materials and supplies to conduct those tests. And then for athletics, at the middle school and high school, there's going to be weekly testing required of students. They will be providing the coach or the athletic director some information about their test results. And then if somebody can show that they were vaccinated, then they would be, they wouldn't have to do that on a weekly basis. They would be excused from that. Or if they had evidence of a positive COVID, then they're considered immune for a number of days. Last year, we had isolation spaces in every building. They were very elaborate, kind of big, and they were used. This year, we're going to have isolation spaces. They probably will not be as big and elaborate as they were last year because we found that often we only have 1, maybe 2 students at most. And so every school is still going to have an isolation space. It's just probably going to look a little bit different than last year. Close contact definition. Any individual who has been within 6 feet of an infected person for a total of 15 minutes over 24 hours. So it's not 15 consecutive minutes over 24 hours, it's 15 minutes. So you can have a combination of 10 and 10, and that puts you over 15. Individuals who have been unprotected, meaning you didn't have a mask on, or for some reason you were in contact with somebody during the infection period, the infectious period begins 48 hours prior to the onset of symptoms. So if somebody feels sick on a Monday, then they probably were infected 2 days prior to that. Quarantines. Vaccinated employees, staff, and students. If you're vaccinated and you're a close contact with someone, hold on a second, I'm getting my glasses. If a vaccinated person is identified as a close contact, they do not need to quarantine as long as they remain asymptomatic. If they have one of the symptoms I had listed before, then they must contact the nurse. Most likely they'll isolate and test. However, employees and staff members who have provided proof of vaccination and/or a negative PCR test on the 5th day of exposure, students may also provide proof of vaccination to the school nurse. Unvaccinated folks who are close contacts will be required to quarantine as identified by the school nurse teacher. Right now, the quarantines are basically two different types. One's a 7-day quarantine, and folks are asked to get their PCR test on the 5th day, and then they can return on the 8th. If somebody is a close contact to somebody and they refuse to get a test, then it's a 10-day quarantine. Travel. Domestic travel, anybody who travels, people who are fully vaccinated with an authorized vaccine, or if they have or authorized emergency vaccine identified by WHO, can travel safely within the United States. Do not need to get tested or self-quarantine if you are fully vaccinated. You should still follow all the travel recommendations from the CDC, which includes self-monitoring of symptoms for a full 14 days, and stay home and get sick if you have any of the symptoms identified before. If you're unvaccinated, you'll ask to do a 7-day quarantine with a test on the 5th day. International travel, this one's a little bit more involved. Say that again. Let me back up 1 second. Unvaccinated employees, staff, and students. Quarantine is not required. However, a test is recommended. Excuse me for that. I misread that one. International travel. Vaccinated employees, staff, and students can get tested on the 5th day or later, and you may report to work as long as you remain asymptomatic. Self-monitor for symptoms for 14 days. Unvaccinated individuals will get a test, a PCR test on the 5th day after travel, and stay home and self-quarantine for the full 7 days. If you get a negative test, you still need to stay home and self-quarantine for the 7 days. If you opt not to get the test, then you will have a 10-day quarantine. If your test results are positive, you need to isolate, notify the school nurse, and we will give you direction after that. If you don't get tested, you have to stay home in quarantine for the full 10 days. You need to avoid being around other people so you don't have risk of spreading COVID to anybody else, and you need to self-monitor for symptoms. This is a little bit different than last year. You know, what we found with quarantine is when students got knocked out of class on a quarantine, we were inconsistent in how we were going to provide instruction. So for students that get put out on a quarantine by the school department, a 7 or 10-day quarantine, maybe even as up to 14 days, we're going to do what they call concurrent learning, meaning the students will be able to join the classroom via a Google Meet or a Zoom. Since Jim and his team have updated the Wi-Fi, we don't see an issue with people being able to connect. For long-term absences, they're going to have to be handled on a case-by-case basis. Most likely families will come in if their student has a risk of severe illness, and then we will work on a health plan, a 504 plan, or an IEP plan to get them the support that they need. But those are individualized and on a case-by-case basis. Transportation, there's no capacity to buses this year. Students on buses are considered a stable pod. Masks are required on all by federal order on all school buses and other public transportation. Windows will be left open as long as it doesn't create any kind of safety hazard. There will be seating charts that will be kept just in case we need to do contact tracing. At this time, hand sanitizer is not required. by the playbook or the outbreak response recommendations. Last year, we were providing hand sanitizer. At this point, we don't need to. Cafeterias. If possible, students will have assigned seats for contact tracing per RIDE and DOH. RIDOH assigned seats with seating charts are strongly recommended. Stable groups should sit 6 feet apart from other stable groups. Elementary students should sit at their stable pod in the cafeteria. Some of this is redundant, I apologize. Cleaning and disinfecting is, we have the same staffing levels we had last year. That was something that we felt was very important. We are following the CDC guidelines for cleaning, and the schedules for the individual buildings will be created with the principals on when they will clean the different locations. And then on the back of this presentation were references for you to look at. There's the Rhode Island playbook, the K-12 playbook, which is being updated literally daily. There's the Rhode Island Department of Health and Safety guidelines. There is the executive order for universal masking in public schools. And then the last link, I'm just going to click on that one if it all works the way I'd like to. This one takes you to our school website. And on our school website, we have a page that is the Coventry COVID-19 information page. And then you'll see on that page the link to our reentry plan. That's the reentry plan that Rhode Island Department of Ed has required for us to have on our website by tomorrow. We put ours up. We actually submitted our plan last week. And if you click on the plan, anybody can click on it. People have already clicked on it today. It's 22 pages. And a lot of what I said under health and safety are included on the plan, but this is public and anybody who would like to read it can read it. With that, the only slide I have left is for questions.
Thank you very much, Mr. Cowett. Guess we can start with Mr. Pearson. Any questions for Mr. Cowett?
Probably. No, mostly just comments. Tried to do this over email today, but didn't quite resonate, probably because I was juggling multiple tasks. In July, the CDC issued guidance that the PCR tests will be going away at the end of the year. So what concerns me are things like on the quarantine slide where you say that employees and staff must provide proof of vaccine, HR, and a negative PCR test. I'm concerned about the restrictive language because the guidance to the labs has already been to move to other testing, approved CDC COVID testing methods than PCR. I just want to make sure we're not boxing people in. If someone goes to a lab and receives another kind of approved CDC test for COVID, and they present that and are told, no, that's not acceptable because it's not PCR, or that's going against CDC guidance. So I'd like to see this tweaked a little bit to allow that kind of flexibility based on the new CDC guidelines for labs.
So we'll definitely bring that back to the Department of Health, and we're definitely not trying to box people out. I think these are the tests we're going to get right now from the Department of Health. But I understand your point. It's well taken because we want to make sure that if there are other approved tests that don't happen to be these tests and individuals choose to go, which they can do, that we have.
Tests that we issue are one thing because we have control over that. But if someone gets an independent test through their doctor or somewhere else, the lab may be using one of the newer recommended tests that are not PCR.
Yeah, no, I mean, that's something we can clarify. And just to recognize, this is a working document too, that we will modify it when appropriate and we'll communicate that out to everybody and we'll make the changes. So we'll definitely do that. But we'll follow up on that.
All right, thank you. I appreciate that. No other questions.
Thank you, Mr. Pearson. Mrs. Colonian?
Thank you, Mr. Pearson. You brought up some good points there because there are other tests that are acceptable. I don't have any questions. Thank you very much. This is very in-depth and detailed, and I appreciate it. And I know it's, things do change and it'll change. But thank you. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Mrs. Colonian. Mr. Murray?
I'll second or third the work on it. I appreciate it. I know it's been difficult trying to keep up with everything as guidance has evolved, but I do have a couple of questions. So there's no capacity restrictions on buses, and we're keeping the windows open, but when kids are on those buses and they come off, they consider it a stable pod. So now they come off, and now they go into a second stable pod? Is that what I'm hearing? So how does that, I mean, I know a lot of this comes from Rido. Right.
Right. I mean, you're absolutely right. These are the definitions that we utilize, and not to pass the buck. I mean, these are the guidance we have to follow. So they consider them a stable pod on the bus, and without the restrictions, then they come off and they go into classrooms. I mean, and then that classroom, at least in the elementary level, and sometimes at the high, is a stable pod. But the reality is that students interact maybe on a sport team, they interact outside. So, and just, we've been through this ongoing, with Department of Health. I mean, when this all rolled out last year, I think I was on the phone with, if not daily, every other day with the Department of Health, because sometimes it just doesn't make sense, right? And yet, so, I don't have, other than this is the guidance we use in terms of determining around close contacts. So we're not able to go out and create our own, guidance around these stable pods. I mean, there's definitions that the health professionals and Department of Health have put forward. So there's a lot of areas where we do push back, but this is something that's been directed, like I said.
And I'm just highlighting, it's not easy, right? I mean, we don't always agree totally with these. This is sort of, we try to take the guidance the experts tell us. And I'm not saying not agree, but it's difficult to sort of rectify some of this sometimes. And I talked about normalcy last week, right? How do we get closer to normalcy?
Right.
On one sense, no restrictions gets us closer to normalcy. But on the flip side, then you got to look at, well, why are we doing some of this?
Mhm.
So I know we're trying to do the best. I guess the point is you're doing the best you can, right? I guess you're always trying to just do what you can in the environment. I would say things like the hand sanitizer, even though it may not be required.
Right.
We talk about layering and whatnot.
Right.
It's good practice. So even though it's, the minimum isn't there, I'd say, my concern is if we have the sanitizer, then it's good practice. Don't go to the minimums. Is there any indications, like in these meetings from the state, about how they're going to respond if the rates go down? Because a lot of school districts prior to us getting this executive order were sort of setting benchmarks, right, for their communities. Now, whether you agree or not agree with that, I think parents, including myself, would like to know at some point, is there a point where it all ends? And so I didn't know if they've approached that at all in
Yeah,
these meetings.
But I think we will. I mean, I shared with the school committee that I'm still working with Mr. Anderson, and it's not for the lack of working. I'm meeting with him tomorrow morning at 6:00, and we're going over the administrative directives. We've had one that was about masking tied to the student dress code, but then we also talked about the other two policies: entrance for students, entrance for employees and visitors. And so we're just working on it, putting on references. It was a recommendation to really connect references to it. But what we're building into it is that we will assess, just tonight, I don't want to wear, we want to make sure, you've talked about normalcy. We want to make sure that we know, the community knows, our administrators know, that we will look at this on an ongoing basis. This isn't just, we're going to do this until further notice. I mean, the governor is going to look at this at September 18th, right? So we will definitely look at this. But you remember last year, the governor, governor at the time set these 5 criteria that need to be in place for schools to open. And that target moved very, very quickly. So even 2 days ago, we're on with the Department of Health, and we had submitted the playbook, or we thought we were done with our health and safety protocols, and they're changing things, or we're finding inconsistencies. And not pointing the finger, but these are to anybody to say these are not challenging times, these are incredibly challenging times. So and I don't want to say we're doing the best we can. We're doing what we think is the right thing to do. Somebody made a comment, I think, before about leadership, and I feel like this is making a tough decision, and we will review it on a regular basis.
Okay.
But things are changing all the time.
No, so what I'm hearing is you're staying flexible, which I think is the key
Right.
aspect of this whole thing, not staying rigid in this. This doesn't mean that what we say today is going to be, and just like last year, right? We didn't envision having graduation altogether without masks, but we did. So hopefully that turns into the case quicker this year. I think Member Pearson made an excellent point. I just would like to back him up on that. I think having some flexible language, I think it was a fair point. Yeah, and it's a difficult year. It's another difficult year. So I know you're trying to take the guidance that's in front of you and work with it and push back where you can. Again, going back to that normalcy, anytime we have a chance to layer in other things and get that outside. I did have a couple of questions, a little more in the weeds. So what I'm hearing is cafeteria. You're talking about distancing. So are we going back to cafeteria? So I haven't gotten maybe I should know that, but I haven't.
Yeah,
heard that.
so that's part of the presentation, right?
Okay.
We worked with the Department of Health and the principals on this 2 weeks ago. And then we got further guidance from the DOH. So we can use those spaces. Their recommendation is for the stable pod, unvaccinated level elementary students, it's to stay at your pod table and to separate space between them. For the older kids, they're not going to be in stable pods because the high school is not a stable pod, but they are going to track kids. We do have the spacing still, and we will still have the seating charts, the assigned seats, so that we can track people, and we'll spread the tables out as much as we possibly can.
Okay, because I heard we can. I just want to make sure we are.
And later on, we will be talking about other alternatives, like we're going to be asking to purchase some picnic tables. We worked with the administration in some tents. So we want to create alternative spaces,
Good.
but in a severe storm, those aren't going to work. But we're trying to be as flexible as we can be.
Lockers, are they going to be able to use lockers? It's a little in the weeds, but
I don't think they're using lockers right now, but I don't, that's something I'll get back to you on also.
again, as a parent myself, these are questions that I have as a parent, likely other parents have, like, the basics, right? Kids want to go to school, go to the cafeteria, use their locker, normalcy. So, all right, that's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Murray. I just wanted to announce that this is a school facility, and since there is a mask mandate in place, all occupants of this auditorium need to be masked. If you don't feel like you can be masked, then you should leave. But I will ask for that cooperation, please. Okay, Mr. Florio, any questions for Mr. Cowett?
No questions, just comments. Ms. Cowett, you and Craig did a very good job on this, on the fly, because in July, we thought we were going to have a normal year. So, very good job. And I like the idea of what you're doing in terms of allowing children to come to school and adhering to masking or not. So they can be homeschooled. Other than that, I think you did a great job. I think it's a good plan, and we move forward.
And I just wanted to kind of respond to that. One is that last reentry plan that I pulled up, that's 22 pages long. I think the superintendent said at the last meeting, we were told numerous times that that plan would not be a lengthy plan, that it would, this was in the beginning of this whole this new surge with Delta, but we were told there was going to be a simple reentry plan. And so when we found out the week before it was due what was involved, it was a lot of work. And a lot of people were involved in that work. And that brings me to my second point. The nurses were instrumental in this. The nurses really did all the heavy lifting. The principals gave a lot of feedback. They asked a lot of really good questions. The nurses did all the heavy lifting. Even after the last pod meeting, which was yesterday, we left the pod meeting. I emailed the nurse. It was the end of their workday. They pulled the meeting together. They answered the questions. They gave me the responses, and I updated the slideshow like literally yesterday before Craig emailed it out to you. So really, all the credit goes to the nurses. They've done the lion's share of the work.
Thank you. And thank you, nurses.
Thank you, Mr. Florio. Thank you, Mr. Cowett. I just want to concur with the rest of the group here that we appreciate all of this hard work that was done to get this up and running within a very small time frame. I thank everyone that was involved in this, and I think we're ready for a motion.
Madam Chair, I make a motion to approve the reentry plan for school year 2021 to school year 2022 as presented.
I second the motion.
And before I call for the vote, are there any people in the audience that would like to comment on the plans? Seeing none, could we have a roll call vote, please?
Catherine Patino,
Yes.
David Florio,
Yes.
Luke Murray,
Yes.
Donna Colonian,
Yes.
James Pearson.
Yes.
Thank you. Motion carries 5-0. Okay. Moving on to the Director of Finance report and discussion. Mr. Sands? Good evening. Is it on? Sure, Mike. Yep.
We can probably put it closer.
Now just grab it. Okay, just grab it. Just grab it. There you go.
All right, good evening. Did everybody get a report, budget report?
No.
Yes, I think we did. Yeah.
Not in here.
I just want to make sure because that's.
Yes.
what we're gonna start with.
Oh, is
We
this-
got it.
Here we go. Nope, that's the subs.
It was also with the, when we delivered the
the audit.
audit.
Yeah,
No,
yeah.
not that.
No,
It was with the audit here. Being in the right place.
Yeah, no, I've seen that.
Let me pass it down, Kathy.
Sure.
Here you go.
Thank you.
Oh, you have it? Okay. Thank you. Okay. We all have one. There we go.
Okay. So, as we all know, this is an anomalous nature of the anomalous nature of the pandemic has made the. Oh, I'm sorry. Okay. So I wanted to start the meeting for the budget with the understanding that the anomalous nature of the pandemic changed a lot of things during this past year. One of the things that we have to talk about, well, we don't have to talk about, but basically that a lot of the costs for the budget shifted from professional services, increase in professional services and materials and supplies. That you do not see in this budget. But what you do see in this budget is from a revenue standpoint, there are three missing factors in this. We have not received the revenue from the cell tower. We have the food, the school lunches, the use of fund balances in school lunches. we had a great showing in school lunches, and we only spent $80,000 of the 200,000. So we saved $180,000, $180,000. The use of fund balances, we also have 1.32 million that has not been received from the town. Because we're not finished and because we're still working on the accruals, we've already put the town on notice that we are expecting the 1.32 if we need it. Otherwise, it'll still stay as a fund balance to the school district. The rest of it, the expenditure side of this, you'll see is pretty much right on par. And we are looking at a positive balance versus a negative balance coming into the new year. But I also would like to state that this is the first time this accounting system has been used for a full year. We switched accounting last year to this year. And because of that, I have asked Sarah Mangiarelli, Linda Ide, and a couple of others to really, the business office is going to be helping out quite a bit in making sure the accruals and everything that was transferred from 2020 is transferred over. So, Mike, what I'm basically saying is this is the closest we can get right now until we do a thorough understanding of where all the accruals are and make sure that everything has transferred from one accounting year to the next accounting year and one accounting system to the other accounting system. I'd like to move on from there to the ESSER fund budgets. Does everybody have the ESSER fund budgets in front of them?
Harold, I think this is about the finance director's report.
Yes. We're not going to the actual budget, but I did put a budget to actual, but that's okay. We're not going to go into the AFR or the American Relief Funds. We're going to be talking right now about what we've spent. The school committee has committed to us, to the school district, $3.7 million thus far. Of that $3.7 million, $1.3 million was spent on Chrome. $1 million was spent on Chromebooks, and $300,000 were spent on summer programs.
Thank you.
We're going to be discussing the ESSER budget, our request for ESSER for further relief funds in another section. Does anybody have any questions concerning the budget or what has been spent in the ESSER budget thus far?
Mr. Florio, did you have a question?
Yes, yes. Harold, the use of the fund balance, Operation 1X times 1, that, I guess that's the cell tower?
No, that other is the cell tower.
Okay,
I'm sorry, it's the very first one. It's the very first one with the orange in it,
okay,
and it has 3,942.
okay, that's.
We are owed from the town $67,000.
Okay. Okay, and how about the use of the fund balance for operations? The 1.32,
That was always part of the budget
okay,
from last year. We did not know where we were with COVID funds, what we needed for COVID, the PPE that was going on, all the assessments that we were doing within the schools, the ERVs, all that. This was part of that, and we had to have that in there. That's why I'm saying that we may not need this, but we reserve the right, and we have already notified the town that we will be needing these funds at another time period.
now Monday night, Harold, the town council with the $439,000 that,
I had that in my report, my director's report, but the problem,
they released it,
the
right?
439,000 was returned to the school. This had to do with the, we did a final project here at the school for managing airflow. And this was something we had to do for the maintenance requirement. And the 439 had been taken the year before because we had not done all our maintenance at that time. That was taken from the town's housing aid and was put in a escrow account so that the school could use it for maintenance this year. That maintenance happened this year, and the money has been returned from the town to the school to pay for that.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you very much. And that's it, Madam Chair. That's it.
Thank you, Mr. Florio. Mr. Pearson, did you have a question or a comment for Mr. Sands?
Thank you for this report. Appreciate the finance updates. I'm glad we're back to getting regular updates. At some point, if we can get a clear report that of all the COVID relief money that we have spent, and maybe even requests, items that we requested and maybe weren't reimbursed for. I'm a little, at this point, being, year and a half into this ordeal. And I know we've approved some budgets, but just understanding where we are in allocating those funds and what we purchased and what reimbursements have and have we not received for that. I know you mentioned some of that in here, but I'd like to see the big picture kind of in one spot. Is that possible?
Absolutely possible.
Okay. I would appreciate that.
I did a budget to actual, but I will include more in that budget to actual because we do have COVID funds from last year that weren't actually put in because we were just using them as we needed when the PPE came in, when we needed PPE or any other thing to do with COVID. So I'll be glad to put a final budget together.
Terrific. That's all I had for questions at this time. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Pearson. Mrs. Colonian?
I don't have any questions at this time. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Murray?
So Harold, I see here, we're a shortfall as far as tuitions coming in
From the,
based on projections 21 versus actuals. Is that the nature of timing or is that the nature of we're seeing less tuitioning into our CTE programs?
we're seeing less tuition coming into our CTE programs.
What are we seeing on average on our outflows? We're increased this year?
At this point, I don't have the final numbers in,
All right.
but I'll be glad to get you those numbers as soon as I do have them.
Okay, I guess it's concerning. So, the only thing I'd ask in the context of that as we move forward is to start delving a little deeper on why we're not getting the enrollment. I don't know if it's the nature of our programs or, other districts, I don't know if, Mr. Levis, you have any thoughts on that, on why
Well, I know which would,
do we overstate it?
We still haven't rebounded from the budget concerns, right? I mean, we had a lot of people leave when we cut sports, and that was just a year ago. So I think, we're working hard. We're advertising. We have another advertisement going out, the summer program this year. So we're trying to do a lot because, and Pontiac just ran an ad. They have all the bells and whistles, but we still outperform them academically, right? But if you look at their ad, 100+ acres, new state-of-the-art facilities. And so, we're trying to keep our students and in our district, instead of, not even trying to recruit others. We want to, but we want to make sure that we keep our, and I think the advertising that we've done, we run ads on the radio every day. There are ads on the radio that run local radio for our career tech. And I do believe exposing our grade 5, our grade 6, our grade 7 students is crucial. So But I still feel like we're still rebounding from the negativity around the budget issues and cuts and, in that, I think some people are waiting to see. So, but we're definitely working on it. We're definitely trying to address it. And I think, like I said, and I think you experienced, when students come home talking about something is so crucial. And so, we are definitely trying to do what we can do to engage our students to stay. So we'll see. We're hoping we'll see the benefits even of our summer program.
No, I think it's a fair point. I mean, we've had instability, and that's my concern, is that we don't continue with that. I know you've tried. I've heard the radio ads. I know we're trying to
We've
run
done the
different
television,
programs.
yeah.
We do have good programs. What's concerning to me is I've had a conversation with a resident the other day who said, "Oh, my daughter goes to school in district." Well, actually, she's in Johnson. She's in a Pathways program for graphic design. We have graphic design.
Right.
So, yeah, so, so then you get into the conversations about perception and why, right? And so I don't know how we change that. I think one of the things is continuing the stability and leadership and not having these rocky roads every year, but, it's $300,000 shortfall out of district right now. That's going to matter next year when we start budgeting. So, it's something people have to be aware of. But I'll move on. The ransomware reimbursement, one time, we're at 49% of our reimbursement. Did we over project? Is this what we're
That's
going to end up with?
Medicaid.
Huh?
Medicaid.
Oh, I'm sorry, Medicaid. I'm sorry.
Medicaid predominantly because there weren't that many students in the classroom. So there wasn't as much. They weren't getting reimbursed as much.
Okay. All right. So we don't expect to recover that loss?
No, we did a search. We talked to other schools. The special ed department talked to a lot of other schools that were going on and talked to the actual Medicaid sponsor and said that a lot of the schools had fallen off because of the pandemic.
Member Pearson, did you have something? I saw you.
I couldn't hear the first part of the answer. I was wondering if you could just repeat the primary reason for that.
The school, I talked to the special ed department because I was worried about how much the Medicaid was falling off. And they went to their Medicaid provider and asked the question that I'd asked them. And they had stated that all schools, because of the pandemic, had seen a comparable fall off in their Medicaid aid coming to them because of the pandemic. Now, yeah.
So just so that you have some awareness, we can bill for like 15-minute increments that are written into like the IEP for children who have one-on-ones or nurses. Unfortunately, that is a population where a lot of them stayed home, did remote. So we weren't able to, they weren't doing direct service. That's the only time you can bill is when you're doing that direct service for that 15-minute increments. So all over the state, that seemed like the population that was really like, wait, hold on a second. I'm not sure if I want to go into school. So unfortunately, we didn't have as many billable minutes.
Okay. But I mean, it's COVID related is the short answer, right? And so, obviously we're not looking to money grab off people if we don't provide a service. We just probably at the time we made the projection didn't feel that the COVID would have such an impact. So it's something moving forward into another volatile year. Moving forward, we're going to have to consider, I think, right?
Correct.
Maybe not something we considered earlier. All right. And I will talk more about the ESSER in a minute, I believe.
Yeah, we're going to be talking about
so
this.
I'll end my questions there. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Murray. I have no questions for you, Mr. Sands. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Ms. Button.
I don't know if anybody in the public had any questions for Mr. Sands before I let him sit down. I don't see anybody, so I guess you're okay. All right, moving on to agenda item number 10, substitute rates for 21-22 school year, discussion and vote.
I'll take that.
Mr. Levis?
I'm just going to pull up the references here.
I believe it was our reference one.
So I know last year we had a conversation concerned that, even if we raise the rates, it may not make a difference. I think I Spent a lot of time talking to Miss Diane Fallon. Miss Card, our HR director, is here. Just an example today, we offered someone a position, part of the bargain unit. It wasn't a full-time, it was like a 0.6. But, we have a lot of people that work in subs and want to get into a district. And this person was offered $200 a day just as a sub, and we lost them today. So, last year, everybody was kind of posturing, waiting for other districts to see what the rates they were going to. We compiled the list of rates based on what we were told by other districts, but we found out today, like one district that has a rate much lower than ours is paying $200 a day. And so Ms. Fallon, I asked her to put in writing to me an email, and you saw where we were able to onboard a significant number of substitutes last year after we increased the rate. We've kept a lot of those subs on. The concern is that in the last couple of weeks, last couple of days, we've lost individuals because districts are making, are deciding to raise rates. You saw our fill rate that early in the year was extremely low. During the year, as the year progressed, we were able to keep subs, and it became a little bit higher. The concern right now is that if we were to go back to our old rate, we will definitely lose individuals. We're losing people as we speak. We lost, just in the last week, we lost several nurses because of other opportunities. And we need to make sure that we have the staff available. And I'm asking the school committee to allow us to continue to give these rates. I know we did use COVID funds to put on building-based subs. We feel that's going to help us, at least at the secondary level, with some coverages, because teachers get paid to cover an additional class. But even then, we still have shortages. In fact, when we get into it's not the ESSER funds, but the American Recovery Plan funds, there's a request to use some of those funds for additional subs based on the Department of Health guidance, where we need to do more supervision, more outside, different supervision in the cafeterias. So I think it would be extremely detrimental if we were to go back to our old rates. In fact, at some point, and I know we're not trying to throw money at a problem, but we want to make sure that we can keep the people we have, because we need to have individuals in front of our students. And we have right now 27 positions. When I say that, that includes some part-timers, some teachers or sub staff that are in the queue, whether we're doing references right now. We have some positions that, based on the contract, have to go to a job fair. So, we have a couple of positions we have in central office positions that we've interviewed before, but we weren't able to get any qualified candidates. And then we have a position we haven't interviewed for. But again, I think it's extremely important that we can continue with these rates for at least this year. And with that, I'll entertain any questions. No, this was what we did last year.
Yeah, so what are we doing this year?
Well, the reason I'm bringing this forward is because we said that the rate would sunset. So what I put down is the rate, if it doesn't get extended, this is the rate we'll go back to. I'm sorry.
I was confused.
Yeah, no, that's okay.
Okay, thank you. So your suggestion is that we extend the 2021, what we had last year.
Correct. That
Which
we
is
can
100
continue for
yeah.
another year. They could sunset afterwards. I'm not,
Okay,
but I'm concerned that, I'm very concerned. I'm concerned with with what's happening with the variant. I'm just concerned that we're not going to have the proper staff. And as Ms. Fallon said, they worked really hard. I mean, I think she indicated in there,
yeah, we have a letter. from-
Department of Ed had shared with us a list, and we sent emails out to hundreds of individuals. And I think we needed 3 positions, and it was very, very difficult. So.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Pearson, any questions for the superintendent?
Is there you have information on how much our expenditures were for the 2020-2021 school year? Total?
I don't have that with me, but I can definitely get that for you tomorrow.
So looking at the substitute rates, from what I heard is, we have a list of substitute rates that we've been presented, but you discovered that one of the districts is actually charging much more than is listed on this list. Is that correct? Is that what I'm hearing?
Yes, yes.
So
That
this-
just took place today. So I think people are desperate and they're going to do what they need to do to, you know, that's what it appears to be, because it's much higher than the rate that was on the
You also provided to us a table that shows by month total absences and vacancies. Those numbers on there, does that represent one teacher per day, or how are these numbers defined?
Yeah, I ran that report out of Frontline. That is for the whole district, for every building in the district, the number of teachers that were absent across the district and what our fill rate percentage was for all the folks that were absent. You'll also see, I think it's on, I don't have it in front of me, but I'm pretty sure the chart also identifies a category of people who don't require subs. So those jobs don't need to be filled, but the ones that do need to be filled, that's the one that reflects the sub fill rate.
To your knowledge, I know you didn't pull it out, so I'm going to ask anecdotally, seeing how last year was, we were in the depths of the pandemic. Are these numbers higher than normal, or is this about what we would see in a normal year?
The fill rates are much lower than normal, because we've been pulling fill rates periodically over the last few years, because we've always been trying to monitor which days we have the most difficulties and making sure that we have subs available to fill. And typically, a typical day, not a Friday in the spring, but a typical day, we're filling around 75% of our vacancies. On a Friday in the spring, pre-COVID, we might be at 55% to 60 filled. Like I said, those days are tough because there's just not many more people absent on those days. This is much lower. On our best day, we were 51% fill rate in May. That was our best, not I say best day, best month.
Okay, that's all the questions I have for now. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Pearson. I'd just like to announce again that if you're in this auditorium, you are in a school and you must wear a mask. So if you do not want to comply with that, I would ask you to please leave the auditorium. Sir, I don't see a mask on your face. Yes. This is a school. I'm sorry, this is a school facility and you must have a mask to be in a school facility. Everyone. I'm sorry, I can't. I can't hear what you're saying. I must ask. You're in a school facility, and so we have a mandate in place for masks. So I can't, officer, can you please try to explain that to the gentleman and escort him out if he doesn't want to wear a mask? If you need a mask, we have extras up here. Thank you. Sorry about that, Mrs. Colonian. Do you have any questions?
Yeah, curious. What type of education do you need to be a substitute teacher?
The regulations changed recently, and it's actually been to our benefit. You can have a few different things. You can have an associate's degree. You can have a bachelor's degree. You can be, and Mrs. Carter can correct me if I'm wrong, I think you can be further than 2 years into your teaching certificate, your teaching degree to sub. The only challenge is you cannot be in a long-term setting if you don't have the certification to be in that setting. So for example, if a math teacher was absent, we can use a day-to-day sub up to 45 individual days with somebody who doesn't hold a math certificate specifically. That creates a whole different situation because now that person needs to be supported by the math department and the folks on the team to make sure that, you know, what we're teaching is aligned to the content standards. But we can't go past 45 days. Then you need to have somebody that has content-specific education and certification.
So basically, our rate, if we don't approve this, would be asking someone with some education, at least 2 years of education, to get paid $11.50 an hour.
Right, right. So the truth be told is at our $95 a day rate for a regular 6.5 hour day, and you get there before that and after that, and you divide it out, the wage is not as competitive as it is to do either a job in another district or just something else completely different. You could be in retail or in food and
Absolutely.
probably do as well.
That was my point.
And,
So-
and we really struggled when we required a 4-year teaching degree because, you know, on one hand, the people want the experience and the opportunity to get a job in a district. So there's a sacrifice that goes with that. But on the other hand, right now it's so competitive, they can get that opportunity and experience really almost anywhere who's going to give them a competitive rate.
I know that, because my son actually did sub, he did long-term subbing his first year of teaching to get that experience so that he could, but I just wanted to clarify that because I think when people think of subs, they don't think, you know, they still had to get an education to do the job and they're really, you know, not getting paid very much. So that's all I had to say.
Thank you, Mrs. Colonian. Mr. Murray?
So I think I agree pragmatically, it makes sense to keep the rate. And we talked about this last year. But a couple of things jump out at me, and Member Pearson brought this up. I calculated over 20,000, almost 21,000 absences throughout the year. Is that normal?
No, right? And so when it was mostly due to COVID.
Right.
And then this program doesn't break them down by category because Mrs. Card, I think there was 4 different categories last year. There was a quarantine absent and then a quarantine sick absent and then a sick, just truly sick, like something different absent. So there was 3 or 4 different codes that we collected on absences. So some of the people that reflected on this page, we put out because they were being quarantined for a close contact situation. So these numbers are definitely inflated.
And I think that's the point I'm kind of making. You know, this is the severity of the issue we're dealing with. That's a lot of absences, right? And a lot of it is due to, you know, quarantining. They may not even be sick, but we've had to put them out. We need people to fill. I know personally I've been affected by this. When you have subs, no offense to subs, but they're not used to the culture, the environment, everything else, the students suffer. So that's been a difficult thing, I know. Not having them filled is especially hard. I guess the only thing from my stance as a school committee member, and I echo what Member Pearson brought up, is I typically like to see a fiscal note of some sort with this because there's a budgetary impact, right? And I wouldn't be interested in that same thing, is what did we spend last year? And then also, we did approve building-based subs. So is there a net impact to that? You know, do we expect some sort of, not to create more work, but I think going into budget season, we're gonna have to have those answers because somebody's gonna call us out and say, well, you want more budget this year, you just approved all this money for subs. And I wanna make sure that we have clear answers on that. I mean, we have pragmatically why you're laying that out, and I appreciate Ms. Fallon writing this letter because it's helpful from the boots on the ground level to understand what the challenges are. But I also want to make sure that we can advocate for that money that we're going to likely spend, right? We're going to, we're upping the salary, but I agree with Member Colunian that, if I can go to McDonald's and make the same as teaching an environment, that's a pretty sad statement. So-
The hope and goal with the building-based subs is cost avoidance, right? If they're in the building and we have a vacancy, we can use those subs to cover those vacancies, then we don't have to fill that job with somebody else. I don't want to put Mrs. Angeloni on the spot, but she was a building principal last year. She had subs. She used her subs every day probably to cover classes that didn't have somebody available.
And I'm assuming as an administrator, it's much easier because they're built into the system, the culture, they're there. So I think that's what I'm getting at from the fiscal standpoint. We did approve that, right? That was hopefully a good use of funds. I just would ask, it doesn't have to be tomorrow, but that in the next few weeks, month, that we look at that, because I think we need to, as part of our sort of balancing and looking at this for future. Because I guess what we're talking about here, we've already had it for a year, no sunset, as I'm assuming. This is it, moving forward. We didn't talk about a sunset. so-
No, I'm okay because I think that we'll have more data. But I mean, we're trying to fill, so we have these building-based subs, which is great, but they're going to be filling positions because we're starting out the year with maybe we can't get teachers. I mean, there's a massive teacher shortage. And so, that's just the reality. I get a survey from news channels or Department of Ed on a weekly basis of, how are you doing with nurses? The other day I answered it in terms of our school nurse teachers, we were fine. And then, a couple of days later, we're not fine, So, I mean, to me, I understand the fiscal piece, but we're responsible to have people, quality individuals in front of our students. And so, we're not out of the woods yet. I mean, I think I'm hoping by the end of the year, we can have a real solid conversation about what should we be paying for a sub, what's the market rate, and have that conversation. Right now, we just can't afford to lose anybody to another district. And I think Ms. Allen indicated that, they onboarded 76 individuals after the rate went up. And we still have kept many of those. We can't afford to lose them. So
And
I'm okay with, let's revisit this in the spring. I have no problem doing that.
And that's not what I'm actually saying. What I'm in asking for the fiscal note, there's two responsibilities as I see it, right? We do have a responsibility to put a teacher in front of a child and make sure but I, as a school committee member, also have a fiscal responsibility, right? We need to look at the budget every year and I need to justify the budget to the council, right? We have that joint conversation. And when they question, we just need those answers because I think it's important. So that's all I'm asking.
Yeah.
Is let's get those answers now. Let's run the numbers. And I think, that doesn't determine whether we do it or don't do it because I pragmatically agree. We need this.
Right.
I think you've established that. The last question I have is where did we get these substitute rates? Is this from?
This is when we called the round. So the
Okay.
one that isn't, and I misspoke, we didn't get a rate from one of the communities, but we found out it was $200.
Okay.
So
right.
Ms. Card and Ms. Fallon made phone calls and,
So this is
it shouldn't be so hard, especially with the school committee association. You would think they'd want to support each other and give the numbers, but we have a hard time, even with the RIASC information, have a hard time, getting people to fill out that data. So,
which is key, right? You need to kind of know what's going on in the environment.
but if you look at some of the surrounding communities, you'll see that like Charahoe, they were kind of playing off of us. They were waiting to see what we did. But South Kingston, I think, is $160. And
I think Member Pearson actually brought this up when we approved it last year. His point was other districts are likely going to eyeball us and keep raising, right? And that's
right, but we need to get
that's capitalism,
right. But we need
So-
to have we need to have people in positions, and we need to be able to. If people go out and, I don't know who's vaccinated or not, right? We just don't have that information.
Yeah.
If people go out on quarantine, and we're already starting to see in schools Monday, today I had 2 notifications from the Department of Health about positive cases, right? So it's going to start coming. We're going to need to have those people in position. So I guess the whole point is right now we can't afford to lose people.
Yeah. And to the point of running the numbers too, we may, and I'm trying to make a point here, which is if other districts raise their rate, we may be put in a position to continue to raise the rates. We need to know the numbers beforehand as we look at that, right? Because we may get to the middle of the year, you come back and you say, we're not getting the fill rates.
Right.
Every other district is now, we went to 145, everyone else is upwards of 200. We need to raise the rates. We have the numbers we can look at and react. So that's what I'm driving at here. So, but yes, pragmatically, I agree with everything you said, Mr. Levis. So, and that's it. I'm done.
Thank you, Mr. Murray. Mr. Florio.
Madam Chair, I believe $145 a day is more than fair for a substitute teacher. And I have to disagree. When I hear this argument about McDonald's, these people aren't food workers. They're mothers, they're fathers, they're people who live in our district. They're people who care about children. They're people who love these kids. I can't explain it to you because you've never seen it. You probably saw it when you were in Afghanistan, when you saw injured people, However, with children, it's way different.
Dave, I think you
Mr.
misunderstood
Florio,
what I
I
was
think-
saying.
Okay,
So
I know what-
I
I
was
know what you're
making
saying.
the same point you were, is that it's woefully underpaid.
It is
So I think that's the
woefully
point you're trying to,
underpaid.
right. okay.
Woefully
So just so we-
underpaid. But $45 a day, $15 an hour is it's
minimum wage.
it's minimum wage, Madam Chair.
I think we all know that, Mr. Florio.
And they work hard, and they work hard for what they do. And the substitutes, they work hard as well. And, you know, I have a master's degree and I'm a substitute. It's a tough job. It's a tough job, and you got to love kids. You got to love kids to do these positions, and that's why they do it. They could work at Burger King and McDonald's. They could work at Burger King for $14 an hour, but they don't want to do that. They want to work with children because they care and because they love kids. That's all I have to say, Madam Chair. I'm sorry, Luke. I get upset about this, but yeah, they really do it. I'm passionate about that, Madam Chair, so I'm going to let it go. Thank you. I'm sorry.
Thank you, Mr. Florio. I don't have anything to say except that I support the same rate that we had last year. I think it only makes sense. And we can revisit it again next year or even mid-year if we have to, because it is market driven and that's what it's really all about. So that being said, is there a motion to approve?
Madam Chair, I make a motion to approve the substitute rates for 2021, 2022 school year as presented.
I second the motion.
And before we call for the vote, is there anyone in the audience that would like to speak to this? Seeing no one, could we have a roll call vote, please?
Catherine Patino,
Yes.
David Florio,
Yes.
Luke Murray,
Yes.
Donna Colunian,
Yes.
James Pearson.
Yes.
Thank you. Motion carries 5-0. Moving on to 11, which is the American Recovery Plan Funds discussion and vote, which was our reference number 4. Mr. Levis, did you want to start this?
Sure. So there's an error. Mr. Sands, when this printed, it didn't, just, on the sheet, it just says error, so we don't have the numbers. Okay. I think it's important if you can share them with the committee. So what we come before you for approval of funds. We also had talked about last time, we had talked about minivans that we would like to purchase to offset our out-of-district transportation, which has been as high as 1.2, fluctuates between 8 million and 1.2 million. We felt conservatively that we could save $300,000 per year by getting these vans. So again, they're one-time expenditures. It'll help us offset budgetary expenditures from a year-to-year basis. We also talked about, and I know Mr. Mario had said, we had talked a little bit before about, whatever we could do to support. We've talked to our administrators. There's concern. One of the recommendations from the Department of Health was, well, whenever you can eat outside, like instead of using cafeterias, because they are concerned about this Delta variant. They're talking about it daily. They're holding meetings with us. So we had talked about getting tents last year, but the reality was we couldn't get tents. And then when we could lease them or rent them, we were able to maybe get them for about a month. So we kind of tabled that. You'll see in there, we've identified tents for the middle school and the high school, which are the larger tents that we felt would create a large outdoor space. We've identified places where we could put those. And then we thought we would purchase smaller tents for every elementary school, again, creating an outdoor space where they could utilize. Our staff, our administrators were incredibly creative last year. But we felt that, I'd like to think this is going to be gone, but we feel that we could utilize these tents even post-pandemic. We have events that are held, but the tents and then we talked with Ms. Maycumber and asked about picnic tables that, if we could get, and what this does is it allows us to cut down the number of kids or students that would be indoors. So not everybody has to be out, but it would again allow us to increase the space among students. So she had asked for picnic tables. Mr. Sands had made calls. We had received 3 quotes on all this information. Mr. Anderson said that we would be able to do this as an emergency purchase, but we would need to get the quotes. And I know there's a lot of background data, and Mr. Sands is here to talk about the minivans. And then Mr. Coward can talk to you. He spoke a little bit about the 4-hour teaching assistants. We put some background in, but we can talk. He can also explain or answer any questions around that. We're trying to do what we can do to support our students and our educators and our administrators with the first 2 items. And the third item is something we talked about, utilizing the funds to, again, offset operational expenditures for the next 3, 4, 5 years, 6 years, as long as the life of the vans. It's important if you have the number, because I think we still end up having over $3 million because, down the road, we want to look at social emotional. We also want to look at innovation. We want to look at, program development. I know, Mr. Murray, I wasn't at that meeting, but I watched the meeting and listened about a lot of different ideas that were presented. So, by many of the members of the committee. So anyways, I've spoken enough. I know Mr. Sands is here to talk about the vans. You have questions, and this is just a ceiling. This was taken off the MPA, and this is kind of a ceiling price. So again, Mr. Sands can talk more about that, and Mr. Coward can talk more about the teaching assistants. So.
I'll jump ahead of Harold and talk about the teacher assistants for a second. So if I'll kind of give you some background information and then talk about the ask. So last year we had floater teacher assistants in every school. They were assigned to the school initially it was for a 6-month period, and then ended up being extended for a full year. And those subs were used to cover a variety of things. They covered absences. They assisted with lunches, with recesses, with almost anything that needed to happen. And then they were in the COVID budget, and they weren't positions that we had hired. They were substitutes, so it was left off the original budget. And then when we started talking about the health and safety guidance, and looking at Rhode Island Department of Ed's recommendations, specifically around the cafeteria use, possibly using outdoor space, and also separating stable pods, even outdoors, even though they don't have to have masks on, they still need to be separated initially. One of the things that came to me from the principals was they would like to have those teacher assistants again, the floater subs, to be able to support and supervise. It would be 4-hour positions. They would be most likely scheduled for the middle of the day. And the reason why we were hoping to do it this way versus a short-term day-to-day is we have a hard time getting a commitment from people when they don't have a predictable work schedule. And so if we could get support here, we could then say to the HR department to reach out to some of the subs that we've used in the past to ask them to work for a committed amount of time. The ask here is for the full year, but it doesn't have to be the full year if things change, right? And if things change and the recommendations, the guidance loosens, then maybe we won't need that level of staffing. But we could definitely say to people, we could say 3 months, 6 months, and then hopefully be able to get them into the buildings. And then the last thing is the superintendent talked about a number of positions that were vacant. And there's a lot of positions in the SRP that are vacant. There are positions that are unfilled. And there are teacher assistants and supervisory assistants positions unfilled. If we are able to get some subs, they could help fill those jobs as well.
Thank you, Mr. Cowett. Thank you, Mr. Levis. Mr. Pearson, any questions?
Thank you for the info. Yep, questions. Picnic tables. So we have a quote here for 20 picnic tables. Really kind of a brass tacks question. What are these picnic tables made of?
They're made of wood.
So these are basic wood picnic tables?
Correct.
Ugh. All right.
And they're made in West Greenwich.
Okay.
I'm
Did
sorry.
we look at all into picnic tables that use like a composite material that will last much longer?
Yes, we did look at the lifetime. We didn't feel that was going to last any longer, just because it's just the steel tubing, and it was actually comparable pricing.
Okay. Question about the tents. It's not a financial question. It's a question of space, especially at a couple of the elementary schools. Are we sure we have space on those lots for a 20 by 40 tent? In particular, I'm thinking of
Well, I think
Tioga, Black Rock.
yeah, we also can make these tents smaller. They have the capability of being smaller. And but we did talk to Mr. Martin, I think, and looking at where we could put these different tents in the different locations. So we did take that in consideration. I mean, at first, Mr. Sands has been very aggressive with this and looking, and we backed it down to the size based on some of the recommendations. But I know with these 20 by 40, we also have the flexibility, like I believe we can bring them down to 2030 or 2020. I can't remember.
2020 and 2030. I mean, a 2020 tent's really sort of made for a band. It's not going to give you the same sort of space that's necessary to have a picnic table or any tables in there, and that's what we were looking to do. I haven't gone to every single school, but it's something that we feel comfortable that they are going to fit, but we won't make the move unless we can, and we can decrease the size.
I'd have to add a chainsaw here to have Mr. Martin clear some space. Just kidding. The transportation I guess my question is that's eligible? That's an eligible expense for under this American Recovery Act?
That's a great question, Mr. Pearson. Because of the COVID, we haven't seen all the paperwork come out for the American Recovery Act, and it's something that we have to look at. But we also have the past ESER 2, which does cover. So it could be sort of a swap. We can go either way on that, and ESER 2 does allow that.
One of the just so my conversation around this was, so most of our out of district transportation is for students with disabilities. It's for homelessness. It's for we share cost. It's for foster children, and I'll give you an example. We just had an email today that students could be, because there's a shortage, we're going to have students that live in another community that may be a foster child that are going to be transported and be on a bus a half hour, maybe a half hour longer each way. So we felt that this will allow us to control that and so it'll be better for individuals. And that was one of the arguments that we felt that we could use. Okay. I mean, we're not going to spend the money unless we get, verification, but I'm pretty sure that we could use it effectively and, appropriately. And again, we feel it's a great one-time use because and I think we're being conservative when we look at our ESSA expenditures and out of district to save $300,000 a year of operations is, this will pay for itself in less than, in a year. And so,
Our bill last year was $800,000.
but no, we will definitely get verification, but I know that, I think along the lines that I explained is, because part of it is how we can benefit students and use the resources to assist with homelessness, with students that have disabilities and students that are socioeconomically disadvantaged. And like I said, to be on a bus for 2 hours, when we can control that, and I think it will be a great, a win-win scenario.
Good. Thank you. That's all the questions I have.
Thank you, Mr. Pearson. Mrs. Colonian?
I was thinking along the line with Mr. Pearson about the composite, the tables. I actually was, there was a place in Narragansett that it's all a different material, but I think it would be a lot more expensive than 500 per unit. I don't think I have anything else. Oh, the tents, do they come with sides?
We did not put them in with sides. It is an option that we can add on, but the way these are priced, there are no sides.
Okay. I think that's it. Thanks.
Thank you, Mrs. Colonian. Mr. Murray?
All right. So I don't really have much on the teacher's assistants. I get it. We've gone through this. We've already approved a lot of funds for this. And I think it's ultimately, if you tell me it's going to be needed, that's difficult for me to evaluate as a school committee member. So I'm going to have trust in the administration. When it comes to other items, though, I do have some serious concerns. And the reason is because this is a lot of money. This is the price of an average house in Coventry that we're approving tonight. And I just got this information this week. And there's a lot of pragmatic things that go through my mind when I see stuff like this. So I agree with the assessment of the structures, having a Parks and Rec background, having been a project manager in construction with a lot of Parks and Rec facilities, 500 a unit for a wood table is pretty expensive. And so I always look at value, like what can we get as an alternative? Can we go to O'Brien and Sons and get a commercial type structure that we know the use that this is going to get by kids, right? It's not light use. This is everyday commercial quality use. This is in my backyard. So, I think if we're going to invest $10,000, I always look at the value. If I can spend $15,000 for double the life, get something commercial, I think it deserves a little bit more consideration because this is, I know it seems like not tax dollars, but it is. So I think if we can get something long-term, and I'm just putting that out there, I think it deserves a little bit more look. And these are things that we want to have an extended life. Right? We've talked about this on Chromebooks and things that, again, things that we can use long-term. The tents, logistics. Do we know how many people it takes to put them up, take them down, fold them up? Do we have storage spaces? What if they get moldy? What's the lifespan? These are questions I have that I don't know if you have answers to, and I'll leave it to you.
On the up and down, it depends on how big the tent is. On a 20 by 40, it's not that many people. Let's say 5 or 6 people. I don't know the exact amount. But I can get back to you on that.
So those are things I think that Jason Martin, being that leader at physical plant, because
Correct.
he's going to have to dedicate staff that needs elsewhere, right? Put it up, take it down. I'm not saying it's not a worthy cause, but we just had a hurricane. So when that comes in, normally with a leasing company, there's a reason why a lot of people lease these things, right? They don't want to own them. So if we're going to buy them, I just want to make sure we get the best value long-term. I know the immediate need, and I'm not trying to delay this, but I don't want to be in a situation where somebody sees a ripped tent out in the field, half built up because it doesn't fit the space, and say, I can't believe they spent money on that.
Okay, just from my own experience, Mr. Murray, I've worked with 2 tents at different schools, large tents, and we had them for over. They're still going strong at this point in time. And the way that you fix the rips is basically you take a caulk gun and you fix it. It's a pretty easy fix. And I find these tents last forever. Yes, there is a mildew issue, which you have to attack at the very beginning. That's why you put a cloth in between each of the tent. When you fold it up, you have a cloth in between it, and then you put it into a dry basement. If you follow everything that they say to do with these tents, they last forever. And these tents can be put together. So it may be a 40 by 60 tent, but if you wanted a 120 by 40 tent, we could also create that. So the flexibility that you have with these tents is that it's not just one event. It's something that we can continue forward and use on a regular basis. And I think that's the real value, because sure, we could go rent a tent for the period in time. Unfortunately, there's no tents to be rented anywhere in Rhode Island or in New England, predominantly because there's a shortage in labor. But what I felt, and what Mr. Levis felt, was is the residual value you get 5 years from now.
And I'm not saying you're wrong, and what you're
Right.
telling me sounds logical, right?
Yeah.
That's the stuff I need in advance. That's the stuff I need written down. It'd be nice to have a cut sheet off the web of what tents we're buying, right? What's the quality? So having those answers so I can look the public in the eye and have that answer is important. So
Absolutely.
that's what I'm asking for, right?
I'll follow
I
up
have to
this.
justify this,
Okay.
right? A constituent's going to say, why did you spend money on it? I'm saying, it sounded like a good idea. That's not an answer,
All right.
right? So I'd appreciate that information. But what you're
Absolutely.
telling me sounds completely logical. I buy it. I just need to verify it. So, so I'll leave the tents there. We've talked about the minivans for a while.
Right.
I would like a way in also from the people who are going to maintain the vehicles, because when I look at cost savings, I don't look at straight line cost savings. I look at cost benefit, right? So now we own vehicles that somebody else once owned and maintained, right? We're leasing, they maintain it. Now we're taking on the burden of maintenance, and I've seen our yard and I've seen our mechanic ability. I'm not saying we don't have an excellent mechanic, but they're working on plow trucks all the time, right? Now these will be new for a few years, but the depreciative value to those vehicles, right? We all know it's half the price when you sell it off the floor. So have you done a cost benefit over the long term? Because eventually, if we take on this burden, we have to replace them. We won't have COVID money again, hopefully, in 5 years. So I just want to make sure, again, that we don't take on a short-term relief that becomes a long-term burden. Because now we have to have drivers, maintenance, it breaks down, we maintain it, we have to go roadside service. These are all things that I don't know if you have answers for, but it would be nice to have that up front. And also understanding that we're vested in this, right? So that I understand the flexibility need pragmatically. Again, pragmatically, it works, right? But I have to make sure it also works long-term. And that's why we do cost benefit analysis, right? To make sure we don't think it's $300,000 and actually that number's flipped over the long term. So I guess, do you have any of those answers?
As far as the vans are concerned, one of the things that Jason and I have been discussing was the use of the vans that it's our contractor right now, I'm sorry, escapes my mind, but our contractor would sort of use the vans to take to transport the students. So we would already have that in place in back. So we'd have the vans there, they'd be using it. And then they would, they would have the drivers to go forward. That's
So-
one of the ideas that we have, but
So we're using like basically a staffing agency to use our vehicles to run them.
correct.
So again, I
And they
go
also
into
have the-
how
the-
much difference, like we're paying now a driver. And I agree, that may work, but I don't.
So can I just
Yeah,
interject?
I'm not
We-
trying to put people on
No,
the
I'm
spot,
saying,
but I
but
don't
we
know
couldn't
the
even
numbers.
do that. I wasn't privy to that conversation, but because we have in the contract, I believe in the SRP contract, we have provision, if we were to buy those, we would have a provision that we would have drivers. So, our plan, and again, we can come back, it's going to take us a while to get the vehicles anyways, my understanding. So we can come back with some more information, but, the intent was just like we have other vehicles here at the high school that are serviced. Sometimes our staff, we have excellent mechanics that can work on them, and sometimes they're done by someone in town. But I think when we look at what we're paying for out of district transportation, and we're looking at the problems we're having, and we're looking at, so from a pragmatic, we're doing a disservice to these children that are in these situations, no fault of their own. So from one perspective, it's going to be great for students, right? We're going to be able to expedite. We're going to be able to be extremely much more flexible. From a cost perspective, we can do a cost analysis, but this is, and again, Mr. Pearson brought up a good point. I know of other people that have done this, but I can easily shoot off an email and make sure this would be an acceptable expenditure. But when we look at the cost, sometimes we have a student on a bus and we pay for the whole bus because that's how it works with statewide. They break up the amount of money based on the numbers. So I don't see how because we can't project going forward how many students will have an out of district transportation, but we can do an analysis of what it's looked like the last few years. And we've budgeted like 600, 700, 800,000, and it's always, gone over. We were able to negotiate, but I don't see how we won't save a significant amount of money that will offset and allow us. This is like seed money, feeder money that allow us to purchase additional vehicles down the road. And just the savings on an annual basis, I have to believe that there's a significant amount. Mr. Wilson is on these ESSER calls all the time, and we're always splitting costs, and it's just constant. And but I have no problem. We can come back with more hard numbers.
Yeah, I guess, you know what? Again, I'm not trying to be difficult, but it is a concern, right? Not having clear answers and not really having hard numbers makes it tough to make a decision. I know pragmatically it may work. But here's the other thing, when you budget stuff like this, they're going to have to be replaced at some point. They are going to need parts and they're going to need maintenance. So are we taking some of those savings aside and we're going to carve those out? Because in 5 years, once they have 150,000 miles on them, they're going to need to be replaced. And I just need to make sure that's not built into our budget. This is one-time funds. So things like that, and the other bottom line is, Member Pearson's right. Things like, I think they're eligible. If we approve this and we go buying these vehicles and it turns out it's not eligible, that's a non-starter. So I think we need to have a clear answer on that, right? Because, I don't want my name on that approval.
But
So
what
I'll
I
just-
what I stated was that ESSER 2, they are you can use the vans in ESSER 2. The AFR doesn't have all the details out yet, but as soon as we do have that, we'll see if that is a possibility. But you can swap because of all the funds that we're using right now, we'll more than likely qualify for the AFR.
So you're absolutely certain, so what I'm hearing is you're absolutely certain these funds will qualify.
In ESSER 2, yes.
And we have enough money in ESSER 2 to cover this without sacrificing other
It
items.
would be a swap over. But
Okay. I'm not trying to be difficult. I'm just,
I agree with you, Mr.
big
Murray.
deal.
I'll do a cost analysis and then I'll show you exactly where it can go.
And,
Because
and can I just say something? We're not going to ask for the advance tonight, but what I'm going to say is though, this 5-year thing, the bottom line is that you know as well as I do, we get in this budget cycle, because you've been in the same situation I've been with that if we can come out, because it's all about where do we generate revenue, right? Where can we make savings? I mean, we have a virtual net metering that you were part of that's really like, nobody seems to really care about, but we're going to save $100 and some odd thousand a year for
But
multiple
with
years.
respect, we had an analysis of that, right? We had
No, I
Balance
know,
Rock
but what I'm-
do an analysis
Right.
and tell us we're going to get those savings.
Right, but what I'm saying is, so we know that, but with the vans, like we can project based on our history, but the fact that we can come forward and show that by using this money, even if it's 4 or 5 years, and maybe we can't buy the vans again, but if for 4 or 5 years, we're able to save an operations a significant amount of money, I think that's a good, you know what I'm saying? That's a good,
But that's not how you do management. That's not how you do municipal management. You know, it's like so let me do an example. 6, 7 years ago, we bought a bunch of trucks with arms on them and garbage bins because recycling was going to pay for the bond. Now recycling's ended up not panning out. And we ran numbers based on false numbers. And I'm not saying they didn't run all the numbers, but I think there was an impression at the time it was going to be a windfall and it was going to be great. Now, I love the rollaway cards, but it didn't pan out and it's not covered because somebody didn't run the numbers. And so that was animosity, I know among town members, that we paid for that. And I don't want us to be that person, right? I want us to do the responsible thing that's based on the math. I'm not saying that the math won't work. It may well work. These are important decisions. That's all. So I'll leave it at that. I don't feel comfortable, but if my other members are.
no, well, I'm not even gonna, I mean, I'm gonna ask the chair that we'll come back with it. I just think though, the analogy with the trash is a little bit different because in preliminary, just looking, and Ms. Mangiarelli was part of this too in the past, when looking at just what we spend on transportation, that we felt that we would cover this in 1 year conservatively. So, but we'll come back with numbers. I mean, I think that's fair ask. That's what I'm saying. I don't want to say that we're not, I don't believe we're going down the route. And we need to come back with, we've seen the forecast of the budget. We need to find ways of reducing our operations costs. And I think when we come back, I think this will be one way that's going to be, for the next several years, significant savings on an annual basis. But I have no problem. Your ask is very fair.
No, I do have one last thing, and I promise that's it. When we get to the tables, ADA access to tables is going to be important. The Governor's Task Force on Disability has been looking for issues. They make special tables for this, as you probably know. I just want to make sure that whatever we get qualifies. So, again, these are, thank you.
Any questions, Mr. Florio? I know we're going to table this, but you might still have a question.
Hi, Harold. Are these going to be electric vans?
Electric vehicles, did you say? or-
Electric vehicles?
No, they're not.
Oh, okay, because I'm looking at,
You'll
Looking at
see,
the
you'll see
quotes
from the MPA list that it's towards the end of the MPA list.
I'm good.
Um,
That would save money.
So I've just had a request that maybe we can, instead of tabling the whole budget, we might want to just consider the TAs first, because I think that's something that needs to move forward. We can wait on the others. How's that sound?
I'm
Good? Okay, is there a motion to approve the TA request funding?
Madam Chair, I make a motion to approve TA request funding from the American Recovery Plan funds as presented.
I second the motion.
Okay, thank you. Anything from the public? Seeing nothing, could we have a roll call vote, please?
Catherine Patino,
Yes?
David Florio,
Yes.
Luke Murray,
Yes.
Donna Colunian,
Yes.
James Pearson.
Yes.
And I'm not sure about the legality. Should we table the other? So I think I need a motion to table the other budget considerations.
Table for budget consideration. We got, transportation
And
and
picnic tables
school picnic tables
and tents.
and tents.
I second the motion.
All right, thank you. Could we have a roll call on that?
Catherine Patino.
Yes.
David Florio,
Yes.
Luke Murray.
Yes.
Donna Colunian.
Yes.
James Pearson.
Yes.
Thank you. Motion carries 5-0 on both of those. Thank you, everyone. The next agenda item is number 12, the proposal for the school performance audit. It was our reference number 5. And take a quick look, and Mr. Levis.
Sure, and this isn't, I'm not, I'm not going to ask anybody to vote on this. The reason I put something forward is because the committee had asked to have a joint meeting, with the town council to discuss the whole performance audit. And then we had tried to figure out some dates that worked, and then we received a request that I had also put in the packet, I'll discuss later, where there's a joint meeting on the 13th where we're going to be asked to discuss a proposal that the town manager is going to present. And so what I was, my ask, I guess, is that I went through numerous educational performance audits, including one that I was part of, but I pulled out some sample, what the scope of the work was in the areas. And what I was looking for was some guidance from the school committee so that I could put something together with your blessings and bring back on the 9th. Because I'm concerned if we go in there and we don't, based on the conversation that we had, Ms. Patino, I'm concerned that, I don't want them to vote on something and, I would rather bring something back that the committee would be supportive of. And then we can go in and say, well, this is what we're looking at having. So that was my thinking behind this. I know I didn't put so I'm not going to ask you to vote on anything. I'm going to ask for feedback. I know I've had different conversations with different individuals. And so this is what I've been involved with when they look at a thorough performance audit of a school department. So I was looking for some guidance or some feedback or suggestions, or we can just show up at that meeting. But I also remember, and I think it was you, Mr. Murray, Mr. Pearson, saying that it's important to get this done before the budget if we're going to do this too, to use this information. So that was my thinking. We have a meeting on the 9th. If there's areas that I didn't cover, I didn't even put down the purpose. We could discuss that. So it was more just this was my thinking of what we'd look at that would give us, focus on areas of need. It would look at staffing. It would look at, our instructional programs. It would look at our departments, our how we run our departments. It would compare us to other districts, similar districts. It would compare us to national standards. It would compare us to, it would look at, the basic education plan and how we perform other components of Title 16, special education. So it would do a really comprehensive assessment. So that was my thinking, but it's up to the committee. Like I said, if you choose to, we just go to that meeting and listen to what the town manager presents, but then we're already at September 13th. And so.
Thank you, Mr. Levis. Mr. Pearson, did you have any comments about the list that we have in front of us?
I like this document. Thank you, especially the second paragraph, because that's really, our objectives in doing a performance audit are really, really important that this isn't a financial audit. Make that clear and look at the areas you want to investigate to look for, again, efficiencies, compliance, and other things like that. The list of programs and systems to be audited, it's a good list. unless I'm missing something, I see one gap.
Okay.
We have review of central administration, but missing here is review of building administration. Especially now that within the past couple of years, the laws in Rhode Island have changed, putting more responsibility on building administrators. Probably should call that out if you think that's appropriate, as something we want to look at as well.
Yeah, no, I think that's great. I think what I saw was they looked at, that came under instructional programs, looking at the different buildings, but I think that's, the more we pull out, the better. And I agree with, with Title 16, there's a lot of responsibility that's put back on our administrators, which I think is also important because whoever does the audit needs to understand that, in terms of those roles. So I think that's a great addition to pull out.
That's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Pearson. Mrs. Colonian.
No, I think this is a great list. It encompasses just about everything. And I like the fact that you put at the bottom there what you're looking for, a firm that has expertise in this area. And that's important also to know, because anybody will apply, but if they don't
Right.
have specific skills, then they wouldn't be doing us justice. But thank you. This is good.
Thank you, Mrs. Colonian. Mr. Murray.
Thanks for putting together the list, Craig. It is helpful, and I agree. We shouldn't go into that meeting cold. We want to be clear. This is something I actually thought about. Wouldn't it be nice to have a subcommittee on or something? Because it really is so important, right? And not that I'm looking for more meetings, but it'd be nice to even have a workshop, right? Because I'd be really interested in input from staff and admin as well. And I think that's something, maybe you can gather if we don't have that work session. But I think I'd like to get from the building level, like what are we trying to get out of it? So we have review, right? But what are we reviewing, right? What is the goal for each of those? And then what's our benchmarks, right? So are we benchmarking against other districts? Are we benchmarking against NEAS type standards?
Right.
What are we benchmarking to? So I think we want to be clear on that with them is
Yeah.
like, we want to see compared to what,
Right,
how are we succeeding or not succeeding, right?
right.
So I'm going to continue to take a look at this. This is a great sort of agenda summary of it, and I think we maybe continue to expand it, but I think the more we can go into that joint meeting and say, this is what we're looking for. and
Yeah,
really
I mean,
clarify.
I think what I was looking for, and it's okay if obviously I'm probably not clear, but I guess what I was looking for is permission to at least try to come up with, and not myself, work with others to come up with those questions through the RFP, right? So like the RFP would include some of those areas that you're talking about. I just bulleted here,
Yeah.
but if you look at like the RFP that a couple of them I looked at with 22 pages, right? I mean, I'm not going to be able to write that, but I could work with, other individuals, Mr. Anderson, he helped me with some of these ideas in terms of, he's been involved with, his concern, and I don't want to put, I'm not going to speak for him, but when I said I support this 6 years ago when Miss Bacon brought it up, because I think if we do it right, and if we write the RFP appropriately, then it ensures that we have the right individuals, at least the right qualifications. And if we write it with the questions, so I shared the Smithfield one with you, I believe, and they had specific questions built right into it. Like they had concerns that the Smithfield School Department was not using the funds appropriately. But that's not the case here. I think the case here is we just want, and you as school committee members, it would be nice to go to your constituents and say, hey, we've done this thorough performance audit. These are our strengths and these are the areas that we're going to focus on. I think we could utilize that, strategic planning. We could utilize that in building bridges with the town. I just see, what I was looking for, not that I want to have more work, but to put something together that we can discuss the 9th. And then say, so we have more of a document that we could go forward with, because I don't know. And in fairness, I haven't asked the town manager. I met with him Wednesday and we had a great meeting, but I didn't ask him about this. I mentioned that, we were going to meet. And so that's what I was kind of looking for, some guidance around that. And
Yeah, I know. I I get it. And I guess my only ask is I want to be part of the process, right? As a school committee member.
That's
Because I
fine.
think as part
Yeah.
of a collaborative effort.
Yeah.
It doesn't include just,
Yeah.
includes admin, staff, not to overcomplicate it, but I think it'd be good to kick it back even before the 9th.
Yeah.
To say, we have additional input.
Yeah.
Because
And
when we go in, it would be nice to strike a
Yeah.
tone with the council saying, okay, this is what we'd like to see.
Right.
Would you like to collaborate on this?
I can
right?
easily do
'Cause,
that. I think the
know.
way I can do it, so it's not a rolling quorum is, and we've done this with the policy subcommittee, is I just share a copy. It might be with myself and you. I'd share a copy with myself and Ms.
Yeah.
Colunian, and that way I get the individual feedback. There is no conversation.
Right.
Because I can be the hub and then I can incorporate it. And I believe, and I'll check. I have a meeting with Mr. Anderson tomorrow morning, but I just want to make sure, but that would be a great way that we could do that. Yeah, I'm more than willing to meet or however people want to, but my goal was I don't want to walk in there. I feel that it would be important for us to come up with at least a draft of what we're looking for, because the conversation still is going to be, what the council's looking for, this current council, and who's going to pay for this, right? Those are still other conversations. And there's an opportunity for the school committee to have that conversation with the council, which we haven't had yet. So I'd like to, like as you said, I'd like to not just go in there cold. I'd like to go there with, this is what we're looking towards. And,
100% agree. All right, along those lines, do we have any cost comparison data from other districts? Because you've got those plans.
Right, we know what one cost, they were like $40,000 to $45,000,
Okay.
50,000, but we're double the size of most of those districts. And I think Mr. Wazika was, and he even said maybe conservatively when he presented 100, 150,000, if they do, but I don't know what the council, in fairness, I don't know, maybe they're just looking for a financial audit, but I think for us to do it, my feeling is that, we need to take a deep dive and look at everything and all of our programs, all of our systems. We've done a lot of work on governance, but if you've looked at our old policy binder, we still have a lot more work to do in terms of the policy work. I think it's nice to have a third party come in, validate all the wonderful work we do, but really give us some real critical feedback on the areas we really need to focus on. And I'm hoping we're already aware of those areas.
So I guess the bottom line, collaboration, getting some numbers lined up, because if I'm putting myself in their shoes, it's going to come up like,
Yeah.
okay, you want all this, how much is it going to cost, right? So I
Right.
think if we can say, we have 3 or 4 district comparisons, this is what it costs them.
Mhm.
And we drive kind of the process from our side, and then we say, hey, come collaborate or don't, but this is the way we see it. So that's all I have.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Murray. Mr. Florio?
I hate following. Because he's so good. Okay. Yeah, this is very good, Greg. This is a great outline. And whatever help you need, I'll be there. I think that's what I think this is what the council's looking for, an honest drill down. And I think that's what we want to see what's working, what's not working. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Florio. Yes, I agree with all my members. The only thing I saw, and I guess it's probably just a given, something about, we're going to have to look at the Coventry demographics, like, how big are we? How many schools we have? I guess that's given in the scope of the work. But that needs to be looked at as well. And I guess the biggest thing is the benchmarks, because I think that's what they're going to ask most. What are you comparing yourselves with?
Right.
Neighboring districts, similar districts in Rhode Island, our size, in Massachusetts, whatever. And I think that's definitely going to be something they're going to ask us. So, but this is a great start, and I think we'll be ready at the next meeting to maybe even drill down further on the 9th.
That's the plan.
Okay. All right, then I think we can table this vote.
Well, yeah, I'm sorry, and my intent wasn't to vote, so,
Yeah.
I mean, it doesn't mean you don't table it, but my intent was just to get feedback, because this is not an RFP or
Right.
a proposal, this was just an outline.
So is there a motion just to table this vote?
Madam Chair, I make a motion to table the vote.
I second the motion.
And could we have a roll call vote, please?
Catherine Patino,
Yes.
David Florio,
Yes.
Luke Murray,
Yes.
Donna Colunian,
Yes.
James Pearson.
Yes.
Thank you. Motion carries 5-0. Moving on to agenda item number 13, which is the superintendent's contract, discussion and vote. I think we're ready to motion on this. Is that the feeling of the committee? All right, is there a motion?
Madam Chair, I make a motion to approve the superintendent's contract.
I second the motion.
Any further discussion from the committee? Anything from the public? Hearing none, could we have a roll call vote, please?
Catherine Patino,
Yes.
David Florio,
Yes.
Luke Murray,
Yes.
Donna Colunian,
Yes.
James Pearson.
I,
Thank you. Motion carries 5-0. Moving on to agenda item number 14, which is the superintendent's update, which is our reference number 2, I guess. And Mr. Levis, that is you. All right.
So let me start with, if you don't mind, the joint meeting with the town council. I just shared the email. So, so the performance audit recommendation by the town manager, and that's why, I wanted to have that conversation we just had. I appreciate all the feedback. And then the other part is the minimum maintenance requirement in the town reliance on housing aid. And, I don't, again, we have the 9th, maybe on the 9th meeting, we can do a little presentation about the maintenance requirement. And I think it's also important to know what had transpired before. There's no intent on our part to not meet maintenance and to set up for the town. So we scoop the money. And, I know, our last meeting, we talked about it, but I think, Mr. Murray talked about the budget process, and I think we have to make that connection that, there's no funding for capital. And, I think we're very transparent about our budget process and where our expenditures are, where our costs are. And, you just have to go through many of our buildings. Our custodians and our staff have done an incredible job getting them prepared, but they're old and they're wearing down, and we have a lot of ongoing issues. So I think it's important, for us to be prepared and the committee to be prepared to talk about, some kind of like root cause analysis around how do we get here? It isn't just that we understand housing aid's important. And the last thing I'll say, so I guess my long-winded way of saying, I'd like to put a conversation or a discussion on the school committee agenda so we can kind of talk about it. Because the other part about housing aid is that myself, Mr. Martin, Ms. Mangiarelli met with Dr. De Silva and Mario Carino at Department of Ed. And they were helping us understand that, the way for us to use whatever funds we have to do capital projects, that we could go there's a process where we can go and receive housing aid so that we could take, $500,000 and turn it into almost $1 million by reinvesting those funds. But if, we need to get some agreement, and we actually did, Mr. Sands had reached out through RIASBO, the Business Officials Association, to ask how many towns received housing aid back when projects, how many, some received it back on any capital funds they had, some received it back on capital projects where they used their own, their operation funds. So we have that data. But I'd like to, if the committee's okay, I'd love to have that conversation. It doesn't have to be lengthy, but just to prepare ourselves And not so, again, I have every bit of faith that as the more we start dialoguing, the committee and the council, that we'll be on the same page and we'll be able to set ourselves up for a very successful budget process. So that's why I put that on there for the superintendent's report. Those two items there, but we've already talked about the performance audit, but I'd like to know if you're okay, the committee's okay with us putting that on the agenda for the next, to have a nice conversation, so we're prepared to go into the town council meeting.
I'm absolutely okay. How's everybody with that? Yes? Yep. Mr. Pearson?
You set the agenda, so I will defer. But yes, of course, okay with that.
All right, thank you. All right. We have a green light on that.
So the other topic was, and I just got confirmation, was the Tioga Sewer Project. We know that was a major project that we needed to complete. And I was just informed, I know they were doing the flow test today, but I was just informed by Mr. Martin that it's completed. Now it's just the cosmetics and the grass. And the other part is that, we'll be able to, we had received $62,000 from the school building authority for COVID, and we'll be able to submit this, and that 62,000 will fund a major portion of this, which will also help us with our maintenance for FY22. So there's a win-win in this. So again, we know we're up crunch time. We know, school started today with our staff. Starts Monday, but I'm happy to report, and I want to thank Mr. Martin. During the crunch time when we're trying to get our buildings prepared to get this done. So that's great news, and I'm also going to be able to report to DEM that we've completed the project. So they were hopeful that we'd be able to complete it before the start of school year. So I don't know if there's any questions on that, but that's a great, I think, win for us now. So, and then just finally, the school opening 2021. Someday, it's just the way things are, but my goal is that we could get a bus and take a tour before school opens and go check on the buildings, because I know I've done that in other districts. And there's a lot of moving parts here, a lot going on with opening schools. This is a much larger district than I had ever worked in before. But I think it's important that to recognize the work that our custodians, our employees that have worked year round have done to prepare for our students. This building, it's 1975, but when you walk in the foyer there, you see it just sparkles, and they've done an incredible job in this building. So, we're ready to go. We're still working on staffing. We had a great professional development opening this morning. I know it was last minute. I apologize. I shared a Zoom link, but Mr. Murray and Mr. Conti did an excellent job bringing awareness to our school community, our staff around the building project and the necessity of school construction. Mr. Chuck Branchow, we recognized Mr. Chuck Branchow, a math teacher, department curriculum coordinator at our high school. He did an incredible presentation about work that the high school is doing around climate and culture. He also had a former student speak who was phenomenal. And then we recognized Nick DeVosi, who is kind of our little superhero at the central office in this school department. He's a courier, but he's done a phenomenal job just supporting whatever's needed. And then finally, we had a woman, executive director, CEO for Pure Edge. She's a former superintendent in California, a former principal, educator, and she really helped us focus on wellness. I mean, that's something that we know we're all going to need to take care of ourselves this year. And if we don't take care of ourselves, we're really not helpful to anybody else. And so she did a phenomenal job. It's probably the first time I've relaxed in a while. And So I think it was well received. I would say less of me, more of everybody else makes for a good opening day. So, but I want to thank our staff coming back. It's just nice seeing everybody. And, we've been through this before and we're looking forward to students coming back. You talk a lot about normalcy. And I think I said just the fact that students are coming back 5 days a week to start is so much better, and like I said, we'll do our homework here. We'll come back with some better hard numbers about some things, but our whole goal of, doing things outdoors and things like that is to bring some normalcy because we don't need to wear masks when we're outdoors, so we're looking forward to a start of a great year. And, this isn't going to be forever. We had talked before. The last thing I'll say is, when we went over our reentry plans in the health and safety protocols, we want to revise these and review these as often as possible. And I look forward to the day when we can send an email out and say, hey, masks are gone. So we do look forward to that. That's our goal. So that's the end of my report.
Thank you, Mr. Levis. Mr. Pearson, anything? Question?
No comments. Thank you.
Mrs. Colonian? You're good? Mr. Murray?
Very quick, Jason Martin, just if you could pass along, thank you. I'm sure Dave's going to speak to this, but I took a ride over to Tioga and saw that project as well. The fact that they got it done so quickly and we can finally settle this issue, we've seen coming up is appreciated. And then, I think discussing all of it, our upcoming joint meeting is very welcome. So thank you.
Mr. Floria?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Greg, I've been working on this issue since I've been on the planning board, which is before I came on the school committee in 2013. It's been a real headache over the years, and I congratulate Jason. I congratulate Boyle and Fogarty. And I congratulate John Aslan because he was a key member when I was on the planning board of making sure the issue someday would be addressed. And I'm just really completely satisfied that that happened. And I have to thank Jason Martin greatly. And I'm sure the parents may not realize it. I'm not sure. I know Dominic knew about it. And it was a concern. It was a real concern. And the fact that it was solved of your administration is makes me extremely happy. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Florio. I'm glad to see this report with some really positive things. I just want to I have one shout out to the custodians in this district and to Jason Martin. Yesterday, I had a meeting here in the library and I walked through the front door and I said, oh my God, look at how beautiful these floors shine. It was like, it was like a mirror. I felt like, it was just amazing. And even though there's some tiles that are burnished all the way down to the bare whatever, it still looked incredibly wonderful. And so I just want to thank everyone that does such an awesome job keeping our schools, which certainly aren't easy to keep up in the shape that they're in. So I just wanted to thank, I'm always amazed when I walk into our schools, because that's not always the truth in some places. So this staff is amazing. And I just wanted to give them a shout out to say thank you for this opening and all the work that they do over the course of the year, keeping this place clean. So that's it from me. The next agenda item is citizens' comments. Are there any comments from the citizens gathered? And please identify yourself and your address.
Mrs. Aldana, I don't know if that's on. You might have to take it and hold it because it's not picking things up too well.
Wow. Oh. Um,
I can answer that question, Mrs. Aldana, and thank you for the surprise gifts. So for the older kids, because I know you have a range, there's no stable pods at the high school because they all have different schedules and different classes. There's 3 to 6 feet that the Department of Ed recommends. We're pretty comfortable that our kids are going to be able to get 3 feet of spacing, and we're trying to lay out the classrooms to maintain that spacing to the best of our ability. Because we have large class sizes, there's very few places where we're going to get 6 feet. There might be a few rare examples where some classes with real low numbers and a large space, but for the most part, we're looking at 3 feet. But what the Department of Ed also recommends, and I know you know this, is other mitigating techniques and layers on top of that. So it's the spacing, it's the masking, it's the ventilation, it's the sanitizing and the cleaning. It's all those things together, which is going to make the room hopefully as sanitized as it possibly can be so kids don't get ill. For the younger kids who are in stable pods, I'm talking mostly elementary, those kids, spacing is not required because they're in a stable pod. They will be wearing masks because it's part of the mandate, but there will be spacing outside the classroom when they go to lunch or phys ed or other places where they may come in contact with other stable pods. So we changed that. So we used to have a content specialist model at the elementary level for grades 3, 4, and 5, and kids had different teachers for different subjects. When we started adopting new curriculum and we started looking at the mandatory number of minutes that these curriculums recommended for you to be able to do it, with fidelity and have, some viability to it, we couldn't keep that content specialist model. So we're reverting back to a more traditional model where the kids will be with one teacher during the course of the day. Now, there could be some flexible grouping that happens when teachers work together and collaborate with kids. And if there's some space big enough, like at Washington Oak, they have the pods, they can go into a pod and spread out. but they're going to be with one teacher. The middle school kids are on a team, you know that. They're still going to be moving from team, within the team. And then the high school kids, they all have their own individual schedule.
Yeah, so so we had that study done by Creative Environment Corporation back, I think it was back in November. It was early last fall. And Washington Oaks systems were very, very good. We didn't need to make any, I don't believe there was any, they looked at the engineering, they looked at all the systems. There were no changes that we needed to make. But I do believe they still keep the windows open to have different air exchanges. In fact, after that was all done, they came out with saying that just opening windows provides the necessary air exchanges. But we looked at, like I said, our systems, and at Washington Oak, our systems met that minimum of 4 air exchanges per hour.
Thank you so much.
I can't believe how big your son has gotten. He was a great altar boy.
I just want to say that I've been on school committee for 19 years and no parent has ever given us goodies. So that's a first. So thank you.
That's because Mrs. Aldana is a trailblazer.
I guess so. All right, thank you. Okay, I don't think anybody else has any comments. So I guess we can schedule the next meeting. Is there a motion?
Schedule next meeting for Thursday, September 9th at 6 p.m. at
An unknown location.
an unknown location.
To be determined.
To do,
I
yeah,
second the
TV.
motion.
Yeah, that's much better. Yeah. Is there a second on that?
I did, I second.
Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't hear you. Okay. Can we have a raise of hands here? Okay, looks like we're all up, so that motion carries 5-0. Is there a motion to adjourn? I have 8:46.
Madam Chair, I make a motion that the meeting be adjourned at 8:46 p.m.
I second the motion.
And if we could all just raise our hands? Cool. Motion carries 5-0. Thank you all for attending. Thank you, officer, for being here tonight. Really appreciate it.
Good job, Officer Rick.